Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and today we're going to be talking about the Pat McGrath Mothership IX Huetopian Dream palette. So I'm going to give you swatches, I'll give you comparison swatches with all of the other palettes that I have, and of course I'm going to try to use as many of the shadows on my eyes as possible. So I was not initially planning on buying or reviewing this palette. In fact, I included it in an anti-haul that I did on Instagram, which if you're not following me there, you should, because more of my sort of everyday content goes up there, and I will link that below. But I have to say, based on promo photos, I thought that the Huetopian Dream palette ended up falling somewhere between Divine Rose 1 and Divine Rose 2, and I didn't feel like this color story was unique enough to justify me spending $125. That said, it showed up on Sephora the same day that I was able to redeem a $100 reward, which if you've ever tried to get one of those things, it's very difficult to do. So when I did get it, I felt like it was a sign, and I ended up spending, like $30 or so of my own money on the palette, which was totally justifiable to me. And I have to say that I'm a lover of Pat McGrath. I own most of her palettes. I've bought them all myself. I think the brand creates a really interesting, edgy, artistic, full experience that not a lot of brands rival. But that said, I don't think their product photos or demos are very accurate in showing what their products are actually really like on the skin and in person. So when this showed up in person, I was surprised, and swatching this palette, I was really shocked. I couldn't believe how intense the pigmentation was. Some of the new formulas that are in here are very creamy. They actually feel like cream shadows. So there were all of these aspects of the palette that I didn't feel like came through in the promo photos, and holding it in my hands and actually getting to touch and play with it made me realize there's so much more to this palette than I thought there would be based on the promo photos. So I will go through each of the shades and swatch them and sort of explain to you what they feel like. So I'm just gonna go left to right, top to bottom. The first shade is Skin Show Nude Ecstasy, and it's described as a shimmer, and it's the only straight up shimmer in this palette. It's very creamy. It almost has a sort of spongy feel to the surface. It's very, very pigmented and blendable. You can see here, that's just one swipe with a finger. It looks a lot more cool toned on camera as I'm sitting here filming just because of the light in here, but it actually has a sort of warm, slightly warm, peachy kind of undertone to it, even though it looks more silver on camera. The next shade is Secret Eden, and this is a straight up matte. And this shade is so interesting. So in the pan, it looks like a light, sort of neutral, dusty rose, and on the skin, it's actually much deeper than it appears. And it has a sort of warmer undertone, again, than it appears to have in the pan. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's really smooth and blends out very evenly. So this next shade is where things get very interesting in this palette. This is the shade Bronze Desire. It's described as a gleaming metallic. It feels wet, it feels like a cream shadow, even though it's not. And it is a bronze that has some micro glitter in it, and wait till you see this swatch. Look at that. It's so buttery, it's so smooth, it's incredibly pigmented, and it almost blends out the way that a cream shadow does, in that it doesn't blend out and you sort of see powderiness around the edges. The edges of the blend look like a cream. So it's this warm bronze, and it has very fine gold micro glitters, none that you can really see on the surface, but that just give you that extra bit of shine. Now we're getting into Pat McGrath's special shades. So in all of her Mothership palettes, the 4 shades on the end are always texturally interesting and sort of different than any of her other shades. And they tend to be baked powders rather than pressed pigments. So this is the shade Bronze Double, oh, I just dug my finger into it. Oh my gosh.
Bronze Double, oh, I just dug my finger into it. Oh my gosh. No.
Okay, I'm okay. We're fine. Just being dramatic. It's literally the tiniest edge of the pan. I will survive. Okay, so this is the shade Bronze Solaris 005, and it's described as a metallic, although it's not the same as the other metallic in this palette. So it has that astral quality to it. If you've ever tried her astral shades, it's sort of a flaky kind of texture of intense micro glitters that are so light in weight that if you like blow on them, they like twinkle into the air. It's sort of like that, but it has a creaminess to it, which I find to be really interesting. It's sort of like a metallic astral hybrid. So this is a very warm gold, almost a copper. And you can see the base pigment is not very deep. I think the interest of a shade like this is in its textural complexity. So it's the kind of shade that you can use all over the eye on its own, or you can also use it as a topper over another shade. So let me try to get a better swatch for you there. So that is Bronze Solaris 005. I'm going to swatch the astral shades at the very end because they're the most special and the most interesting, and I actually want to swatch them next to each other. So hold tight for those. We're going to move on to the second row. I am making a total mess of this palette, but it's fine. It's meant to be loved. So this next shade is called Extreme Plum Noir, and it is a matte shade, and let me tell you, this formula in this shade specifically is where I see the most improvement from her past formulas. So in the past, I've struggled with some of her more plum burgundy shades, especially as the palettes get older. I've found that they can be a bit dry and sometimes a bit patchy, like they don't stick to dry spots. But I see such an improvement with this formula. I mean, it's super smooth, and while it is on the drier side of the matte shades, I think, it blends out so well, and I don't see any of that patchiness even as I'm swatching across the front of my arm, which has, you know, arm hair and texture. It's still blending out really evenly. Then we have another metallic. It's called Cosmic Bloom, and this also has a really wet, sort of creamy consistency with not a lot of kick up, and it is a pink with pink glitter in the formula. This also swatches so beautifully. It's so smooth. I wish you could feel it. I mean, it's so even. I think you can see how this shade and that Bronze Desire shade are, I don't know, even on the skin have a really creamy quality to them. This also has a bit of gold glitter throughout, and it gives it that extra shiny finish, even shinier than Bronze Desire. This coral shade is a matte, and it is called Shockwave, and you are not ready for the pigment in this shade. It looks like a pretty standard salmony coral in the pan, but let me tell you, she swatches deep. So look at that. It's so pretty. It almost has like a sort of neon quality to it. I just find it to be such an interesting shade, and like all of the other mattes, it's blending out really smooth. I think it's actually this and was this called Secret Eden? They are definitely the smoothest mattes in this palette. So onto the Triochrome shade. This is the only Triochrome in the palette. It is called Blitz Sextreme, and it is a sort of sister shade to the shade Sextraterrestrial in Divine Rose 2, which I will swatch next to it after this. So this feels much more like a traditional metallic to me than Sextraterrestrial. Sextraterrestrial had almost this like baked gelée quality to it, and I don't think this is a baked shade. I think it's a traditional pressed or poured pigment, but it has incredible shine. I mean, look at that. That was just one swipe, okay? It feels really smooth. I can tell there are some like oils and things in this formula, and so it flashes green at some angles. I don't know if I can get it to flash on camera. Green at some angles, flashes purple, purpley red, and then sort of gold at the edges, a little bit of turquoise. It's really hard to capture this complexity on camera. It's sort of one of those things that you have to see in person. And now we are on to the astral shades, the special shades. These are her baked formulas. These last two that I don't even think you can see how cool they are on camera. They're very textural. They're full of micro glitters. I know that a lot of indie brands do interesting sort of textures like this, but you don't see a lot of mainstream brands do shades like these, frankly. So let's do the top one. This is the shade Astral Venusian Orchid. Venusian as in Venus. So it's very flaky. It has a lot of texture to it, and when you swirl your finger around in it, it does pick up some of those flakes, like in actual flake form. So when I use her astral shades, personally, I like to use a glitter glue, or I just kind of accept that I'm going to have a bit of fallout. Wait till you see this. It is so cool. You have no idea what this looks like in person. So it is it doesn't really have a base color. It's sort of a lilac with a flash of silvery blue, and it catches the light so well. It reflects really beautifully, even though the formula has these like textural flaky micro glitters. Once you press them onto the skin, they do stick. And I find that the heat of your skin helps. These are the shades where I could see her, I forget what she came out with, the eye pencil that works as a makeup base. I think that would work really well with a shadow like this. I just didn't pick it up. And then the last shade is Astral Amethyst Moon. It's this beautiful purpley blue iridescent shade. It's the same formula as the other astral shade that I just swatched. So that's what it looks like picked up on the finger. It's a duochrome. And there she is on the skin. The blue flash on this is really, really interesting and really much brighter in person than it is on camera. But these two together are just incredible. I mean, I don't really have shadows like this in my collection personally. So I just pulled out some of my other Pat McGrath palettes to give you some comparison swatches. I didn't pull out all of them, but the ones that I think have the most similar color stories. So I have Divine Rose 1, Divine Rose 2, Bronze Seduction, and then I also pulled out her Ritualistic Rose quad, which is the only quad that is full of all astral shades, so all of her special shades, which I thought would be interesting to compare to the ones that we have here. So I'm not going in any sort of specific order right now. I just picked up Divine Rose 2 because I think it's the most similar in color story to Huetopian Dream. So the most obvious comparison that I would like to do is between Blitz Sextreme, the triochrome here, and the shade Sextraterrestrial. So I don't know if you can tell as I'm picking it up, but it's much thinner and harder packed in the pan than Blitz Sextreme is, as I mentioned. So I'm gonna go here next to it. Wow, they look very similar. They're almost the same. Sextraterrestrial has a sort of different purpley undertone to it. It's not quite as red. The red shift isn't quite as pronounced, and the gold is not quite as pronounced, but they're very, very similar. I actually prefer the texture of Sextraterrestrial because it's so thin. There's something very pleasing about using it because you don't need to pick up a lot of product, but it has a really nice spreadability and like smoothness and a really, yeah, like a glidey finish across the eye. The next comparison is with this plum shade in the Divine Rose 2 palette called Extreme Burgundy. So I'll compare that to the plum shade in Huetopian Dream. So there you can see the burgundy shade from Divine Rose 2. So I think you can see it's a little bit more red in undertone, and it actually has a little bit more pickup than I think the matte in Huetopian Dream. And then I will show you Skin Show Rose Opal, which is also a sort of shimmery metallic. It honestly feels almost the same as the shimmer shade in Huetopian Dream. The Divine Rose 2 shade has more of a pink undertone, whereas the Huetopian Dream shade is a little bit more beige and has sort of a creamier look to it. This is Bronze Rosé 005, and I will swatch that against Bronze, I can't remember what it was called, Bronze 005 in Huetopian Dream. So you can see that the Divine Rose 2 shade has more of a metallic base, and it's actually more copper, like more of an orangey copper than the Huetopian Dream shade, which is more textural and has a less pigmented base overall. Then I have Ritualistic Rose. I apologize, I don't have the shade names in front of me, so I'm just gonna refer to them by their color. But I'm interested to swatch this light pink with a gold flash next to, well, it's actually not very similar to any of these, but let's swatch it next to these other astral shades. They look similar on camera, but I promise you they're really different. So this is a pink that flashes gold, and obviously this is a lilac that flashes sort of blue, and this is a purple that also flashes a different shade of blue. So they are actually quite different in person. And then I'll swatch the bronze shade next to Bronze Desire. So yeah, this bronze shade is much deeper. It's much more of a neutral brown, whereas Bronze Desire is sort of a warm toned brown. Now we are on to Divine Rose 1, which is a lot more neutral and subdued and sort of wearable in tone, although it's one of my least worn Mothership palettes, I have to admit. So I'm interested in swatching the matte shade in here, this lilac shade, next to the matte rose pink color called Secret Eden, this one. Oh, so they're actually really different. I don't know why in my mind I thought they were kind of similar. So this shade, which I don't have the name for, I seem to have lost the label, is a sort of muted, sort of gray undertone purple, whereas obviously Secret Eden is more of a dusty rose that actually looks quite warm compared to this lilac shade. Then we have the Skin Show shade in here. She kind of always does a light metallic creamy shade in the top left corner. And I will compare that to these top shades. So it's quite similar to, this is the Huetopian Dream shade. I think it's pretty similar to that one. This actually has a bit more of a pearly look to it. And then lastly, I have Mothership V Bronze Seduction. This is probably my most used palette from her, also because it's the one that I've owned the longest. So specifically, I was thinking about this bronze shade that I would like to swatch next to, where did it go? This guy, Bronze something 005 from Huetopian Dream. Very similar, actually, although I think the shade in Bronze Seduction is deeper and a little bit richer in tone. It has a little bit more brown in it and a little bit more of a base tone, but the textures are actually quite similar. I do think the bronze in Mothership V is a little bit more chunky, like you can feel the glitters in it, whereas Bronze whatever 005 from Huetopian Dream feels less chunky. It feels more like the glitters are dispersed into the formula more evenly. I do want to see this astral shade. It's sort of, it looks white on camera, but it is actually a sort of multi-chrome white base. I want to see it next to these other astral shades. I'm just going to swatch it below. This is obviously more of a metallic, like a shimmery metallic that has a flip to it. It has a sort of pinky, sort of lilac-y shift to it. And the last two I'm going to swatch are the astral shades in the Mothership palettes. These two right here on the bottom. I love this corner shade. It has a green flip that is beautiful on the eyes. I don't think it's gonna look anything like these other astral shades Yeah, you can see how green it is compared to the other two, but really beautiful. And I'm excited to see her do more of these sort of iridescent flippy shades. And then this last one is another astral shade that has also a bit of green, a bit of blue. I'll just swatch it right here. And a bit of gold. A lot more gold than any of these other shades have. So here is the swatch madness that has happened on my arm. Obviously, you can see there are certain colors that are similar to past palettes, whereas there are other colors that are not duped at all in her previous releases. So yeah, there you go. All right, let's get into the eyeshadow application. So I prepped my base like 2 hours ago now with the Pat McGrath foundation. This is the shade LM14 and it's one of my top 5 favorite foundations. It's a beautiful natural finish, medium coverage to buildable. And I just have some concealer down with some powder on my eyes and that's it. We're primed and ready to go. I am going to do 2 different looks on each eye just so that I can show you as many of the shades as I can. So I'm going to start with the shade Secret Eden with a fluffy crease brush and just take that all over the eye. Okay, that's blending out really nicely, really evenly, no complaints there at all. It is sort of easy to sheer out if you're looking for a more natural makeup look, or you can build up the pigment as I'm going to do here. Then I'm taking a smaller brush into the plum shade to deepen up the outer corner. It does have a bit of kick up. I don't mind that at all. I'm gonna use my finger in the shade Cosmic Bloom. This is the one that I said felt really creamy. It does have a very creamy quality to it, so I think fingers work best for a texture like that. And I'm going to apply that all over the eye. So pretty. It's a lot brighter and it has more of like a hot pink quality to it than it does in the pan. I think that's because the glitters in this have a hot pink sort of reflect. It's very smooth and blendable, no fallout at all. And even with my finger, I'm sort of able to get a really nice blend with the edges. I don't even feel like I need to blend out the edges with a brush. So I'm just gonna leave that as is. I'm going to go into the coral shade. This might look really bad, but it might look cool. I'm gonna use a flat sort of shader brush into the coral matte shade, and I'm going to take that along my lower lash line. It's super pigmented, it blended out really nicely, and for a matte shadow along my lower lash line that's that pigmented, I really like how smooth it looks. It doesn't seem like it's falling into any fine lines or doing anything funny. Then I'm gonna take another flat shader brush into the Skin Show shade, this creamy shimmer shade here for my inner corner. I'm just gonna blend that up and into that Cosmic Bloom shade. So this turned into kind of a graphic eye look, but I'm into it. I mean, all of the shadows are blending together really well, and I feel like the pinks and corals in this palette really complement each other. For the next eye look, I'm going to go all over the lid with the Trio Chrome shade. So I'm actually gonna start out and just take my finger, and I feel like that's the best way to apply a shade like this personally, and I'm just gonna swipe it all over the eye. So I'm getting a really smooth coverage. It almost looks wet across the lid. Now I'm gonna go into a brush just so I can get some precise edges on this look. And I'm gonna do not exactly a cut crease, but something sort of like a wing. That's very cool. Something about the reptilian quality of this shade made me go for this sort of more graphic look. But I would totally wear that just as an eye look on its own. It has this like beetle wing quality to it. So I'm going to take a small brush into the bronze something 005 shade, this goldy bronze, and I'm going to take that into the inner corner. This is one of those slightly flakier shades, so it does have a bit of texture kick up, although once it touches the skin, it sort of melts onto the skin, I find. You can really see the warm, sort of coppery orange undertone in that shade. Then I'm gonna go into an angled brush, and I'm just going to take that plum shade and line my lower lash line for a little bit of definition. Something I like about this plum tone is that you can really see its undertones as you blend it out. It has, yeah, these really sort of grapey undertones as you blend it out. It's very cool. So I'm into that matte. I think the dark matte works really well as a liner because it doesn't have a lot of kick up. It's not crumbly. So sometimes, you know, if you have a really powdery dark eyeshadow and you're using it to sort of stamp along your lash line, you get a lot of fallout and then you get those like dark spots on your cheeks. This didn't do that at all. It went on really smooth. As I was stamping against my lower lash line, it just stayed exactly where I needed it to. So that is 2 eye looks. They're different, but sort of similar in shape. I really like the way these performed. I'm not gonna do mascara because I'm gonna do another eye look, but I do just wanna show you the versatility of these shadows. So here's a better look. All right, I'm back with a fresh canvas, ready for more eyeshadow. I'm really curious about this coral matte shade, and I want to use it all over the eye a little bit more. It gave me a pretty good blend. I do have some micro glitters left from that last look. It's not because of this eyeshadow, it's just that I couldn't get everything off without a full cleanse. For such a bright tone to blend out as a nice wash of color on the eyes is pretty good. I mean, I'm happy with that. And then I wanna go into this bronze shade, Bronze Desire, I think this was called. This is that gleaming metallic. And I'm using a flat shader brush. This is the Sonia G Soft Shader. And I'm going to take that all over my lid and blend it into the coral. This is blending out beautifully. I mean, this is totally a me shade. It's exactly the kind of shade that I would wear even just on its own as a one and done eyeshadow all over the lid without the coral underneath. But that said, it's blending into the coral really nicely. And I'm actually surprised how much I like the combination of this bronze and coral, because the bronze did sort of cover the coral, but the coral is just this sort of glow around the edges of the eyeshadow. So I'm very into that. Just gonna add back a little bit of coral around the edges so you can really see that color pop. I'm gonna take the Sonia G, what's this called? The Flat Definer. It's a very small flat brush into this Skin Show color. I apologize, these names never stick in my mind. And I'm just going to highlight the inner corner there, as well as the arch here, just for a little highlight. And then I'm gonna take that brush that I dipped into the coral shade. I'm not picking up any more product. I'm just gonna blend out the outer corner along my lower lash line. And it doesn't really distribute a lot of color. It just creates a more cohesive eye look. I actually love that eye look. I wasn't sure if the bronze was gonna work with the coral, but I'm definitely gonna recreate this look at some point. And then for the last look, I saved the best for last. We are going in with the astral shades all over the lids. To start though, I wanna sculpt the eye a little bit, and I'm going to use the shade Secret Eden through the crease and to contour the eye just slightly. I want this to be a very iridescent forward look, but I just want to give the eye a little bit of definition. And then I'm going to do the same thing, just lightly blend it onto the outer edge of the eye, along the lower lash line, just like the outer third or so. Just connecting it in that outer corner right here. So I'm not gonna be conservative with this at all. I am going straight into this top astral shade, the lighter one, with my finger. And I'm going to take this all over the inner half of my eye, and then I'm gonna go into this purple astral shade on the outer half of my eye. So let's just see how this goes. Oh my God, it's so good. You do get a bit of fallout with these. I like to use glitter glue usually, but I didn't today just because I'm lazy and I forgot. I can totally see why the Intensifies eye primer stick that they came out with would work well with her astral shades. That is so cool. Isn't that so pretty? On the eyes, I see much more of a gold blue sort of shift. And I'm taking it into the inner corner. So pretty. I love that. I'll use my index finger into this astral shade, and we're gonna take that on the outer corner and just meld the two together. I think these will blend into together really nicely, yeah, with just a clean finger because they are the same texture. Okay, I love that. I'm just going to pack on even more texture and sort of blend the two shades together with a flat shader brush. So I'm just gonna add even more pigment and texture, and it is very buildable, even though I'm definitely getting fallout. I should use glitter glue. I will next time. I'm just gonna take that all the way up into the inner corner of the brow bone. And I'm gonna flip the brush and go into the purple. You can barely even see that secret Eden shade that I initially put down, but that's not really the point here. It's just to give you that like glossy, wet look across the eyes. I think the secret Eden shade just helped contour the eye shape a little bit for me. Something interesting that I thought about as I was applying this was that I think the astral shades would be really transformative over a dark eyeshadow, specifically over a black eyeshadow, but even over this plum, which I'm actually going to try with this lighter shade. So let me give you a swatch of the iridescent shade on its own. And then let's do a swatch of the plum. And then let's do a swatch of the astral shade over the plum, and blended together, you get a sort of totally new eyeshadow color. I mean, that's beautiful. It actually brings out this sort of blue, it actually made that a blue-brown eyeshadow. I don't know if you can see that, but it totally changed the color of the eyeshadow once they sort of melded together. So these astral shades, because they're transparent, have a very transformative quality overall. I actually really want to try that trick with this coral shade. So let's do a swatch of that. And then let's do a swatch of, again, the light astral shade over it. Ooh, that's pretty. It's turning into this sort of watermelon color with a gold, it brings out the gold flash, I think, in the shade. So very cool. This is all to say, because these are artistry palettes, there are so many different ways that you can use these eyeshadows and so many different color combinations, yet at the same time, it's very, very wearable. Okay, so I just finished off my makeup. I wanted to match up both of my eyes to close out the video, and I actually deepened the outer corners with the plum shade, and then I added some mascara with my Bite Beauty mascara, and on my lower lashes I used the 1999 Beauty mascara. And on my lips, I wanted to stay with the Pat McGrath theme, so I lined my lips with a little peachy liner, and I took a dab of the Pat McGrath Luxe Trance lipstick in Realness, and I just sort of dabbed it over my lips with my fingers, just a very sheer wash of color. And then I topped it off with my favorite Pat McGrath lip gloss in the shade Flesh Astral, which is a really nice sort of neutral peachy rose sort of lip. So I don't have anything on my cheeks or face other than foundation, and I'm feeling a little bold, and I know that you can use the Pat McGrath palettes on the face because they are artistry palettes. They're intended to be used however you'd like. So I'm actually going to take a highlighter brush and go into this Skin Show Nude Extreme shade very lightly, because I think this is going to be a very blingy highlight. And I'm just going to lightly, yep, she's blingy, just very, very lightly whisk it over the tops of my cheekbones. Very lightly. It's actually a pretty bright highlighter for me and my skin tone right now, but it is really pretty if you're into that. And because this is a sort of more satiny, creamy highlight, it's not metallic, it's just a soft kind of pearly vibe. And why not? I'll just take what's left on my brush and go down my nose. Do a little bit of this moment. It's cute, right? I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna do a lot, but then I keep adding more. So a few closing thoughts to wrap up this probably very long video. I think this palette is so much more saturated, pigmented, texturally interesting, and versatile than what I thought it would be based on the promo photos. I also think it swatches and performs very differently than how it looks in the pan alone. You know, when it comes to saying whether a product is worth it, I don't really abide by those kinds of reviews. I think it's very conditional and subjective based on your budget, your makeup tastes, your lifestyle, whether you will use all of the shades in an eyeshadow product like this. So I think especially at a luxury price point, it's really subjective to your tastes and your budget. But that said, I think people will be really surprised by the performance of this eyeshadow. And I also think that something I'm maybe most surprised by is the improvement of several of the formulas. I'm really happy to see that Pat McGrath as a brand is continuing to invest in improving their formulas and bringing out new formulas. I think when you are at this price point and you're sort of setting the bar for other makeup brands, you need to continue to innovate. And so I'm really happy to see that they are doing that. Because this color story speaks so much to me, these like warm tones and these interesting textures, I can just tell I'm going to use it a lot. So obviously I will continue to update you and share any looks that I create, especially on my Instagram, which you should follow me there. And if you've made it this far, just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.